Week 5 is in the books, and we are 1/3 of the way through the NFL season. And today, Jeff Bell and I, we're going to look back at Week 5 at some of the running backs and wide receivers that had usage worth monitoring. This is something we've done every single week, and it really helps us just kind of fade the noise and separate what's real from what's fake. So, Jeff, what's the first backfield that you would like to talk about today?
I think we have to talk about Carolina, given the performance of Rico Dowdle. I mean, we know that was a great matchup, but we know upcoming is another great matchup, a revenge game going up against Dallas. And Dowdle had over 200 yards rushing, over 25 yards receiving. He was the first player in Carolina Panther history to have a 225 game. I think the closest was Christian McCaffrey one year. I think he was about 175 yards or so with 25 receptions. So that tells you the type of day that Rico Dowdle had.
Yeah, the 234 scrimmage yards that he had are currently the league high for single game scrimmage yards. More than Puka Nacua, more than Bijan Robinson, Christian McCaffrey. Like Rico Dowdle just comes out here on a random Sunday and just absolutely torches it. So I think the jumping off point for this conversation is, what does it mean for Chuba Hubbard when he comes back? Because we don't know if Chuba Hubbard's going to be back this week. We don't know if he's going to miss some time. But if and when he comes back, I mean, this does seem like one of those situations where Chuba Hubbard, like, he's on a fairly big contract. They clearly value what he brings to the table, but this isn't a superstar running back who really has a stranglehold on the workload. This does seem like one of those, like, Rico Dowdle was so good that they can't really put the genie back in the bottle.
Well, all throughout the offseason, the entire talk was that they expected to have a split backfield, to have a committee backfield. And there was a lot of talk about Dave Canales saying that he thought that Hubbard and Dowdle can do the same things, can do the dirty work, be the early down back. There was talk about Trevor Etienne having a role there as well. I mean, we know when you go out into free agency, and I know they gave that big contract to Chuba Hubbard and they really value and appreciate him. But when you sign Rico Dowdle immediately coming off a 1,000-yard season, and then you turn around and early in round 4, you select Trevor Etienne, I think the idea for me was that, you're not going to have bell cow Chuba Hubbard production coming through this year. They said exactly what they want to do. And this is a team that needs to run the ball. They need to run the ball to be successful. They spent heavily on the offensive line last year, and they really invested heavily in the backfield last year in the offseason as well, drafting Jonathan Brooks and then having still Miles Sanders there. And so I think what they want to do. They want to run the ball, and both backs are going to run the ball.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're going to see going forward now. I mean, I think this is just one of those too good to ignore type of situations where Rico Dowdle looked just as good as he did last year, and it's just like, things move so quick in the NFL. We forget that Rico Dowdle was just consistently churning out 100-yard games for the Cowboys last year. And I think another takeaway is that this Carolina Panthers offensive line is pretty good. We know they invested heavily in it a couple of years ago, and I think so much gets lost in the discussion about the Carolina Panthers because of Bryce Young's shortcomings. But this is a team that when they want to establish the run, they can, and they don't need a superstar receiver or running back. They can go out here with Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard, and still kind of force their will on their opponents. Let's talk about the Los Angeles Chargers because Omarion Hampton placed on IR. They're saying 4 weeks is what they're expecting, and they're hoping that as soon as his IR stint is over, he can return to action. What we saw in this game on Sunday, 6 opportunities for Hassan Haskins, 5 opportunities for Kamani Vidal. Vidal was also in there for some of the goal line usage, which we like to see. But Jeff, we can't do a week 5 show, it seems like, without talking about this backfield and how you should attack it going into week 6. I'm interested to get your take, and then I'll share mine. What are you doing with this backfield on waivers?
Put waiver bids in for both players at relatively low values. Hope that I don't need to put them into my week 5 lineup and then or my week 6 lineup and then see what we have coming out of week 6, I think is the way that I would be approaching it. I mean, long term, I don't think either matter all that much because I think that Hampton, once he gets back and up to speed, we saw him have that's bell cow usage, like Chase Brown level last year, bell cow usage, the entire hold on the backfield. So I think they're going to, after a month, if it is just a month, they're going to go right back into Hampton, and both of these guys are going to forget about it. And to me, with the situation being so up in the air on which direction they're going to go, and I really think it's going to be both, is the direction they're going to go, because we've seen them have a committee backfield in the past. I think they're going to play both players and probably not use much in the pass game. That's the underrated thing, I think, from Hampton over the last 3 weeks, was really ramped up the pass game usage for him there. I don't think those targets are going to go to a running back. I think they're going to involve the receivers, be a throw heavy offense, and have these guys coming in as committees to for blitz pickup, for short yardage work, and I think that that's where you're probably going to land.
So, Jeff, do you remember who Rico Dowdle on Sunday ran for his 234 yards against?
The Miami Dolphins.
And who do the Chargers have in the schedule this weekend?
They have the Miami Dolphins.
So you understand the excitement for these guys and why people want to pick them up and say, who's the guy going to be? Who should I put in my lineup? Am I crazy to say that like both of these guys kind of are flex worthy this week? And it might not be pretty. I mean, you might be getting 6 points in that flex spot, but you could also get a Rico Dowdle type week where one of these guys breaks off, a couple big runs, gets into the end zone twice, and you end up having yourself a week winning flex play. So I am with you, everything that you said. Like, I think that they're going to split touches. I'm not overly excited about either of these guys' profile, but when you're playing this, picking guys up off of waivers and trying to put them in your lineup, you're probably doing it because you're a little bit desperate right now. And I think that this week against Miami, both of these guys, truth be told, are probably going to be outside of my top 30 running backs. But for a lot of desperate managers out there, I think you can do worse in your flex spot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that that's a good point to remember too, and especially if somebody is built. I used to be before the market shifted and allowed me to take good running backs. I used to be one of the most devout zero RB people in the space, and so yeah, I would be all over these guys in that type of situation, and even just in general to have them on your roster in case it breaks in their direction. I think that's a good call out to note that they do play the Dolphins coming in, and they really need to get right. This is a team that
Mhm.
it, 9 days ago they were 3-0. They felt like they had conquered the AFC West. They were going to be on cruise control, going for the number one seed, and all of a sudden you got upset by the Giants in a game that maybe you did a little bit of sleepwalking in, and then you turn around, you lose to a good Commanders team, and
Mhm.
that was a mess. I watched that game this morning, and there was a Lad McConkey touchdown on a punt return that was called back from penalty. There
Which
were
was
multiple deep
awesome. It was
plays. It
such
was
a good punt return too. Like, it was a
that
shame. The block came so far away from Lad McConkey, didn't
yeah.
impact the play whatsoever. It was frustrating to get that wiped off.
Yeah, I mean, we need to have a that play was too cool to call that penalty there. I mean, that definitely was. But there were multiple deep shots too that they connected on that. There was one of them, I think of about a 20-yard throw to Keenan Allen, and what I think was one of the offensive linemen was not in the right position. I know that was a big point of emphasis last week across the league. Just little things like that you could tell that they started out 3-0. They were feeling very good, and they lost focus a little bit. So I think that this is a get right game primarily for their passing attack, and whether they need to really protect Justin Herbert. That's the other part of this. They have not been protecting Justin Herbert.
And I think the other thing, we all know that they lost Rashawn Slater in the preseason, and that
Yeah.
was a very tough hurdle to clear, but it seemed like they did it. But now without Rashawn Slater and also without Joe Alt, I mean, this might just be too high of a hurdle for them to clear. So, it's an ankle injury. They're hoping that Alt is going to be back in a couple of weeks here. So hopefully nothing too severe. But yeah, I mean, without your two bookend tackles, the run game, passing game, everything is taking a hit right now. And I feel like what we saw at the beginning of the year and what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, Alt is much more to blame for that. Not to blame, but the reasoning for that. I mean, I remember watching Omarion Hampton film, and like Joe Alt is just unbelievable. The way that he just stands guys up, like he makes it look effortless. Like he will just get under a guy's pads, just plant his feet and just stand there. And you see these guys like frantically trying to get around him and they can't. Like he is just a brick wall in the run game. So not having him definitely makes things a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
But let's go down to
And
another team that I want to talk about
well,
here,
I
Jeff.
think we
Yeah.
should give some level of who are you picking up, I guess. Who are you prioritizing between Haskins and Vidal?
I'm doing the same thing as you. I'm putting like 2 to 3% bids on both of these guys. And if I happen to stumble into a league where nobody else is interested and I can pick one up for super cheap, I'm happy to do that. But they're not guys that I'm like desperately going out of my way to get. And I also want to say we're recording the show on Tuesday night. The show comes out Wednesday morning. So by the time the show comes out, most waivers will have cleared at that point. But yeah, I'm putting like $2 to $3 bid, 2 to 3% bids on each of these guys. And I'll probably only end up with a couple of shares here and there. But this is one I think I'm okay sitting out. I think it's going to be Haskins is going to be the goal line and the short yardage guy. Kamani Vidal is going to be the hurry up and the tempo guy. And based on game scripts, we can see the pendulum kind of swing between either of them. But I think this is going to be a headache that I'm just not going to want to involve myself in. And we know that when Hampton comes back, he is going to assume his workhorse role again.
Yeah, I had a lot of questions today, and again, this is going to be too late for probably to be very actionable. But I'd kind of forgotten about waiver priority leagues because we talk so
Yeah.
often about Fab. But I had a lot of questions from people that have the number one waiver priority, and they were asking, "Do I burn it on one of these Chargers running backs?" And I'm not at that place of burning the number one waiver priority. I do feel like Fab is held maybe like valued a little bit too much, like in the space of like, but at the same time, that knowing that your league mates value Fab a little bit too much allows you to kind of put in lower bids and still get guys.
And like, if for whatever reason Michael Carter is still out there, I would much prefer Michael Carter to either of these running backs. Are you there as well, Jeff?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. Tajay Spears returned, and what we saw was pretty much a 75-25, rough estimates here, but 75-25 split. Tony Pollard at 74% of the opportunities, 73% of the snaps. We only saw 4 carries for Tajay Spears, but we did get a report this morning, Tuesday morning. Brian Callahan said that he wants Tajay Spears to be more involved going forward. We heard that this preseason. We heard that last preseason. Is this one of those things that we just think is like never going to actually come to fruition?
Oh no, I think it's going to come to fruition. I think that Spears. I mean, the way he closed last year, and then Callahan immediately after the season basically said, "Yeah, I screwed that up. Like we need to have that guy out there." And the way that they saw Tony Pollard get worn down as that season went on, I think the interesting thing, the concerning thing, we really need this Titans offense to get better fast because you had a month where Tony Pollard was the only running back involved, and he didn't have any fantasy utility in any week during that month. I don't think it was like running back 28 or something like that
He was
over
like
that
fourth
month.
in opportunities and like 30th in scoring.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if you're talking, unless this offense gets dramatically better, or Spears is a very strong in the pass game, maybe that's where they enter that discussion. But if you got a guy that's getting 100% of the work and you can't use him, and now he's getting 60 to 50% of the work, you definitely can't use him.
I do want to say that I have a little bit of faith in this Titans team. I don't have a lot of faith in Brian Callahan, and I don't have a lot of faith in the Titans as a whole. But that Cardinals game, man, like sometimes that's what you need is just a ball to bounce in your direction to kind of get the confidence back. And I got to say, man, like Cam Ward, I rewatched that game yesterday. Cam Ward was making some big boy throws in the third and fourth quarter. I mean, he was dropping balls in a bucket. And it wasn't just the deep throws downfield to Calvin Ridley that got people excited. It was also when Calvin Ridley wasn't open deep, him able to get to his second read and get the ball in Chigakonkwo's hands where he could make a play after the catch. I mean, he was just dicing up this Cardinals defense. And I mean, a lot of that is just the Cardinals like frantically, we just dropped the touchdown and then we kicked a ball into the end zone for a touchdown. I mean, it was not going the way the Cardinals wanted it to, but we've seen how a game like this can really, hurt or help another team. Of course, the Bears fan in me can't help but think about week 7 last year, where like the Bears were strutting into that game in Washington, 3-game win streak, 4-2 record, feeling really good. And then that Hail Mary, they went and lost the next 9 games while the Commanders went on and made the playoffs. I mean, like one of those games that can be what helps get a team on track. So really diving down narrative street here, but there were some moments from Cam Ward that got me excited in this game that doesn't have me ready to completely write off the Tennessee Titans yet. Let's go to another backfield here, though,
Real
Jeff.
quick,
Do you?
real
Yeah.
quick though. So we did Thursday Night Live with me, myself, and Matt Waldman, and this is why you're so good, Dave, because you mentioned the Bears, but Matt brought up the point of he was kind of asking me what I thought about Cam Ward, and I kind of mentioned Caleb Williams, and he was like, "You hit it exactly on Caleb Williams. Had the coaching wasn't there for Caleb
hmm
Williams, the easy throws weren't there for Caleb Williams, so he had to go out of his way to try to create." And I think Cam Ward's in a very similar situation on Brian Callahan doesn't really seem up to speed to be the coach of that offense and putting Cam Ward in a good position to succeed. And so that's why you're seeing Cam Ward doing a lot of crazy things that not very many quarterbacks in the league can try or would try.
And Cam Ward's got the arm talent to do it. And this does seem like one of those situations too, where like I'd be shocked if Brian Callahan is still the head coach going into 2026. And I think that this is going to be one of those where there's going to be some offensive minded head coach out there or vying for a head coaching job that's going to see some of the tape and some of the spectacular things that Cam Ward can do. And I think that's going to be a pretty desirable seat going into 2026. So, but for this year, we're focused on 2025, and I still think that there can be something here. Also, where I can in Dynasty, I was a heavy Cam Ward drafter in rookie drafts and in startups this offseason. I'm testing the waters and seeing if I could still buy him if anybody's starting to panic yet, because I still think he could be a good quarterback. Let's talk about the Washington Commanders here, though, Jeff. And this is one that I think we just need to, kind of own up to and say, hey, we were wrong. We made a lot of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt jokes over the last few weeks here, but he completely took over in this game. 67% opportunity share, 16 opportunities, 150 yards, just 5 carries for Chris Rodriguez. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt also got the start, which is worth noting because he was coming in, and a lot of the stuff that got people excited about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was coming in these garbage time games. And now we see him come out with the start, just look really, really good in this matchup. I can't help but think about Woody Marks and how he kind of got duped after last week with Woody Marks feeling like he ran away with the job only to go back to his role the next week. I don't think that's going to happen here, though. I think Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt brought something to the table that no other running back in Washington has so far.
I think a really underrated point on Woody Marks is that Nick Chubb's familiarity with the Baltimore Ravens defense and the Baltimore Ravens defensive schemes, bringing
Mm-hmm.
that into the game of this is a guy that he has seen the Ravens twice a year
Of course.
for the last feels like 15 years at this point. But I think that was probably a factor too, and the fact that that was just a laugher blowout to the point where 8 different Texans got a rush, and since 1970 only the Packers last year had 9 different players to get a rush, to tell you like the amount of volume that the Texans flowed through, just different opportunities. British Brooks getting carries, Damian Pierce
Oh,
getting
British Brooks
carries.
getting a
So
carry before Woody Marks was one of the funniest moments on Sunday. I couldn't help but laugh at
yes,
that. And I think I remember
yes.
that Packers game. Was that the one, if I recall, Jordan Love had to go to the sidelines for a little bit. Malik Willis came in, got a
It
couple
was
runs.
it was
Jordan
the
Love.
game that Malik Willis started with Jordan Love out. It
Oh,
was like week
yes.
2 or 3 when it was like I think it was either the game that they ran Josh Jacobs like 45 times, or it was like the week after that of like they just had this crazy game where all these receivers got carries and every running back got carries. But that's kind of I think there's some context around that, but I do think that Nick Chubb being familiar with that Ravens defense probably was not nothing in coming to the game planning in that. But I don't see the situation being remotely similar, to be honest, because there's not a Nick Chubb in this backfield. There's not a veteran that you trust, you rely on. There is
It
Jeremy
was
McNichols, who
Austin
they
Eckler.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but there was Jeremy McNichols, who they like rescued out of I don't even know where he was, like out of the league for a couple of years, and then Chris Rodriguez I think has been cut 3 or 4 times, and the rest of the league has basically said we're good. We don't really need to add Chris Rodriguez over here. So that's what you've got Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt battling against, and I think part of it is that the surprise that it took so long to get this type of performance. But now that we've gotten it, I mean, they would be crazy, I think, to go back and to not do that. So I would be wheels up on Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and if the Woody Marks situation does allow you to potentially maybe buy low or buy high, that's not really high. That might be a very beneficial situation, maybe worth something exploring.
So Jeff, you and I, for anybody watching the show, they might not have heard of Fantasy Intervention. That's where you and I connected a long, long time ago. And you wrote an amazing article there. It was kind of a game theory article, and it was about the death of the vulture running back, but how these rushing quarterbacks were now taking some of the volume and the fantasy production away from running backs instead of vulture quarterbacks. And I think once you get into the red zone, that's still a very real thing. But I have another hunch that maybe things have changed now over the last 6 years since you wrote that article. That now what we're seeing, and this is in a very small sample size this year, but we're seeing like the Commanders' best rushing games are coming when Jaden Daniels is out there from their running backs. And we have seen Brees Hall, his best games have come when Justin Fields is out there. And it almost makes me wonder with the change in how defenses are operating now, where they are playing the big play and they're allowing for these runs up front, if having a mobile quarterback where you're forced to take that into account. All it takes is the play action, or if you want to get really fancy and run an option or something like that. I think that having a mobile quarterback can actually benefit a running back, and maybe not in the touchdown department, but definitely in the yardage department. And I wonder if that's why we saw this big boom now for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, because Jaden Daniels is out there. Defenses are forced to account for his rushing, and it just opens up lanes for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, just like Brees Hall has had 100 plus yards and a touchdown in every single game that Justin Fields has started and finished so far this year. Am I thinking a little bit too outside the box here? Or do you think there could be something to that?
No, absolutely. So when you look at it schematically with the defense, when you're facing a Jaden Daniels or facing that type of quarterback, you're going to probably have a little bit wider splits on your defensive end so that you are able to be outside so you can cover more space outside. Plus, you've got it's like the Ravens last year with plugging Derrick Henry in there with Lamar Jackson. You've got all
Yep.
these defenses are sitting in this too high cover shell. And so they're all back up here. And then now all of a sudden you're spreading your defensive ends out. And now all of a sudden, these like we saw it last year with Saquon Barkley with Jalen Hurts. Like Saquon Barkley was running through run lanes that are the size of a semi truck could go through them, and versus like what we saw when he was in New York when everything was packed in on top of him. Like that is absolutely. I mean, it's the roots of the RPO, the spread option. It's a lot of what Urban Meyer in college with Florida, what he kind of
Mhm.
innovated with Utah, with Bowling Green up into Florida was the spread RPO, where basically Urban Meyer took the classic wing T offense and then turned it into spread offense. And Tim Tebow was the most famous example of that, but utilizing Urban Meyer at Florida had like Chris Rainey and like all these different running backs that were actually wide receivers that were running backs. And so he always had Urban Meyer would have a power back and like Ezekiel is the very best example of this. He would have a
Mhm.
power back, and then he would have like Curtis Samuel and guys like that that would kind of be able to like step in, and so he would run the triple option out of the shotgun and have these guys that would be like the shuttle pass to Aaron Hernandez was one of the things that he was doing, like shooting these guys like different directions, and you can't really do all that in the NFL because of just the athleticism that you're facing against and the schematic understanding. But it worked really, really well for a long time in college. And now that's the natural counterpoint. That's why you're seeing two tight end sets on the field because defenses are going with these two high cover shells. And so the natural way to do that, when you replace, you take another Urban Meyer player, Brandon Spikes, you take Brandon Spikes out of the middle linebacker position that is just a born natural run stopper, and you're putting two lighter linebackers there because you're only running basically nickel and you're relying on three safeties kind of instead of a nickel back to play this too high shell. You've changed your personnel dramatically. Now all of a sudden you answer that on the offensive side with two tight ends, that especially a guy that you can motion around like an Isaiah Likely guy or something like that. And that's where a lot of the Ravens had major schematic advantages last year, or the Eagles, what they did was they usually had a bigger receiver that they were trying out in the slot, or having AJ Brown out there gives you kind of an extra tight end that's not really a tight end at times. And so, yeah, it's a natural thought there, and it opens up perfectly for Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt playing with Jaden Daniels.
And I'm glad because, like, if you were to push back on this, I was going to go back to last year with the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens and 12 personnel. That's why I love doing these shows with you, Jeff, because I can set you up like just completely unprompted and you can go exactly where I want you to with it. But that is what we're seeing now. And we saw that last week as well, where Zach Ertz was out there, only had one target in the game, but we also saw a lot of John Bates out there. They were running these 12 personnel sets with two tight ends that were just making it easy. And like, I don't even think Jaden Daniels was 100% in this game. Like, coming back from a knee sprain, they didn't want to completely unleash him, but just the threat of Jaden Daniels, just the idea that he might take off and run with the ball changes how defenses have to play them. So this is
Well, and
something we constantly see trends shifting in the NFL, and we've seen the defensive shift to the two high cover shells, and now we're seeing the offense kind of punch back with these jumbo sets. I mean, we're seeing a lot of three tight end sets now. Like 13 personnel is something that you see often on NFL fields that was never on the table 4 or 5 years ago. So we're seeing these jumbo sets. We're seeing mobile quarterbacks teaming up with running backs. And just like, hey, if you're going to let us run for 5.5 yards per carry every single time we try, why would we do anything differently? And I think that's kind of where the Commanders are right now.
we're seeing unbalanced lines. We're seing the Lions are a team that they'll do it quite a bit, where they'll put a tight end on basically like the left tackle spot, and they'll flip Penei Sewell or Taylor Decker, whoever it might be, over to the other tackle, like stack their tackles on the one side. The Bills will do that a lot. The Bills had, I'm blanking on his name, but before they brought in Jackson Hawes, they had basically an offensive lineman that was kind of like a tight end that they would bring him in, then they would unbalance Deion Dawkins on the other side. And so they would run power to that side on the unbalanced line. But one of the interesting things schematically about the Commanders adding Deebo Samuel is Terry McLaurin's a very, very good downfield receiver. And so you've got Terry McLaurin as a downfield receiver, and now Deebo Samuel brings you that element of a wide receiver that you can bring into the backfield, that you can run that RPO action with, that you can run that personnel with. And that's why it's so fascinating that they went out and added him. And that's why I was pretty high on Deebo Samuel coming into this year, because I look at him and say, if you're going to go out and add Deebo Samuel, you're not asking him to run 9 routes or to ask to do these different things. You're understanding exactly what he can bring schematically to your team, and it fits so well with Jaden Daniels in that quarterback.
Yeah, and it has been good. I mean, Deebo Samuel, top 10 wide receiver so far. And sure, we saw the little bit of a boom is Terry McLaurin was getting up to speed early in the season and missing last week, but his role in this offense is integral, and I don't expect that to change too much. Huge riser in my rest of season rankings article that came out yesterday. Let's talk about the New Orleans Saints, Jeff. This is another interesting one to talk about. Alvin Kamara had more targets than Kendre Miller, 4-1. We love to see that. Kendre Miller had more carries than Alvin Kamara, 8-10. I don't think many people expected that. And then, of course, we have the Joker, Taysom Hill, coming in, getting 6 carries and a pass attempt. Now, I didn't expect a lot from Taysom Hill. I didn't expect him to play this year. So the fact that he was out there doing what he does, just slamming in on the short yardage situations, was good to see. 6 carries for -1 yards. Or hope that there'll be better days ahead for him. But how are we looking at this situation now where Kendre Miller is getting a bigger and bigger role? Now we've got Taysom Hill in the equation as well. What does this mean for Alvin Kamara?
How long is he a Saint?
I've been asking that question for 4 years.
Yeah. Well, yes, but when you're 1-4 and you've got a 30-year-old running back, and he's probably arguably not the best running back on your roster, then kind of at some point, what are you doing? I understand that Alvin Kamara has meant a lot to that organization, and maybe that's a big part of it. But I think
Chargers.
that's what's that? Yeah,
Chargers.
The Chargers. That's what I said yesterday. Yeah,
that would be so much fun. I mean, a perfect complementary skill set to Omari and Hampton when he returns.
Bingo. Yep. Put him in the Chargers, and then you have him as the pass catching complement to Omari and Hampton. They obviously wanted to have. I don't know. I don't know the order of operations. Like, they added Najee Harris, and then they didn't know that they were going to get Omarion Hampton in the first round of the drafts, but that had to have been a thought in their mind of as they were going through that. And so it was very intentional to load up that backfield. And now we know Najee Harris is out. Calvin Kamara is the perfect guy to go out there and bring into LA, and then have him kind of be that complimentary player, take some things off his plate, open up the offense a little bit for him, playing with a great quarterback again, a chance to go into the playoffs. And I think that would be the perfect landing spot.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now. They'd have to get a little bit creative with the contract, but we've seen the Saints, when dealing players in the past, are willing to kind of eat some of that money and move on. So the Saints would have to probably eat some of that contract in order to move Alvin Kamara, but definitely possible. But in the short term, what should be? Of course, we want to wish cast an Alvin Kamara trade, but for the sake of discussion, if that doesn't happen, what are we doing with Alvin Kamara? Are we just looking at him as kind of like an RB3 in PPR at this point?
Yeah, I think that kind of, yeah. It was, I ranked him this week, and the system was very mad at me because I had him at about running back 29 or so. And it was saying that he was supposed to be running back 15. And I was like, no, I'm going to leave him at running back 29. And that's about where he finished. So, yeah.
Patriots run defense hasn't been terrible either. So, it's not like he's got a cake matchup. This is one where I'd be, I don't want to throw around the term panic, but I think there's reason to panic about Alvin Kamara, especially considering where he was going in drafts this year.
There absolutely is reason to panic about him, and that's largely the reason to panic about him is Kendre Miller has looked better than Alvin Kamara this year at running the ball. That was the Bills played the Saints 2 weeks ago, and that was one of the big takeaways of Kendre Miller just looking so strong running the ball in between the tackles and having that element and being able to, because my biggest frustration with Alvin Kamara to start this year was that he wasn't seeing the pass game usage, that he was kind of stuck in a Saquon Barkley type role for Kellen Moore's offense. And Saquon Barkley doesn't get a lot of targets usually. We know that Saquon Barkley is very talented at catching the ball and can do that. It's just that the scheme that he was in doesn't ask for it. So it seemed early that Alvin Kamara was going to be kind of that answer to that. And I think now they feel more and more comfortable with Kendre Miller, and I would expect Kendre Miller's targets to continue to climb and the opportunity to continue to grow because he looks very good. And so that's, break glass in case of emergency at some point with Alvin Kamara. And of course, you paid up to get him. You drafted him where you drafted him, so you might feel bad putting him on your bench, but at some level, hopefully you got other options.
Yeah, and I think another thing, like looking back at last year too, some of the context missing from the year. Taysom Hill was injured, Rashid Shaheed was injured, Chris Olave was injured. So we look at this target volume for Alvin Kamara, and it was, we know he's a good pass catcher. He always has been, and he always pulls targets. But last year was kind of the outlier season where he's playing with a hyper conservative quarterback in Derek Carr. Their top three pass catching weapons are all out of the picture. So yeah, that's why he was seeing 7 targets per game, because nobody else was there to catch the ball. And now I think what we're seeing is kind of what we could expect going forward, barring a trade. One last backfield I want to talk about here, Jeff, is the New England Patriots. Antonio Gibson, ACL, he is going to be out for the year. What we saw was exactly a 36% opportunity share for both Ramondre Stevenson and TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson had 50% of the snaps. Ramondre had 45% of the snaps. But I am guessing that with Antonio out of the picture, with Antonio Gibson out of the picture, this is just going to be as basic of a 50-50 split as you can imagine between the two, right?
That would be my expectation too. And I think
Which is
I
good,
don't think
because
it's
three-headed backfields are a disaster. Two-headed backfields, we can live with those.
exactly. And the player as explosive as TreVeyon Henderson, we can live with those because it only takes one play and you can break off a big run. I do think I was thinking about this today on a lot of comparisons to like a souped up James White version of
Hmm?
TreVeyon Henderson this summer. I don't think we accurately counted for Drake May's mobility from the quarterback position relative to having Tom Brady back there and having Tom Brady, quickly diagnosing and reading the defense and quickly getting like, okay, this is like James, like run your little, dagger route or whatever we need to do here on this play because that's what's going to be open. Like versus having Drake May as a player that's going to hold on to the ball,
Yeah. Why
be
check
able to
down for two
create.
yards,
Yeah,
recovered guy in the flat when I could just run for six?
yeah,
That's
or
what's
I'm just
gotta
gonna
happen
do the
here.
sprint out right that I'm still seeing in my nightmares from Sunday night. That he's just gonna every single play just gonna sprint out right and then chuck it 35 yards out downfield on the run. Like so, I think that there was a little bit of a false expectation and false equivalency on trying to say that TreVeyon Henderson could be the souped up version of James White, but at the same time, Henderson is way more talented than what the Patriots are doing. And I think that there's a lot of hand wringing about Henderson, but watch the game. Henderson is very explosive. That translates at some level, and especially the Patriots offense has looked very good so far this year. At some level, that's going to break free. That's the type of situations that you go out there and you grab that guy because people are, especially 5 weeks in, and maybe they're 2-3, 1-4. They're ready to panic and freak out because they bought the hype. They used a third-round pick on TreVeyon Henderson in their redraft league or in their dynasty league. They thought that they were ready to contend, but they got TreVeyon Henderson, and now it's not happening. Go out and buy him because he's the type of player exactly like second half of the rookie year Jahmyr Gibbs type player of like, oh wow, like this guy is here. It shows up. It's very obvious on the field.
And I want to point out too, and I want to say this like carefully because I don't want people to get like upset about it. But Mike Reese, a beat reporter for the Patriots, I don't know if you saw, he shared some notes from the game today, and one of those notes was that TreVeyon Henderson missed a block on the kick return that ended up getting Antonio Gibson injured. Now he didn't say what that was the exact missed block that ended up hitting Antonio Gibson or anything like that, but this has been what we've been hearing about TreVeyon Henderson through preseason and through the start of this season, is that he struggles with run blocking and pass blocking assignments, clearly struggling with special team blocking assignments as well, which is very confusing because he was great at that at Ohio State. And sometimes it just doesn't translate to the NFL. And that's what we're seeing now. So, losing Antonio Gibson and then seeing that the rookie who has struggled with blocking misses a blocking assignment on that play, that's going to cause a little bit of a conversation here. But on the flip side, where you've got Antonio Gibson, or I'm sorry, TreVeyon Henderson missing pass blocking assignments, you've got Ramondre Stevenson out there with a greased watermelon, just like coughing it up every time he gets hit. So it's like, what can you live with as a head coach? Would you rather live with the missed blocks or the guy who's just consistently turning the ball over?
Yeah, and part of me does wonder on TreVeyon Henderson, the missed blocks, those types of things. If he was a 4-year player at Ohio State, he was sharing the backfield with Quinton Judkins. He was going up against overmatched teams literally every single week. If I don't think that there's long-term concerns about him being a player that might struggle with preparation, but maybe it's the type of thing of like just something you need to learn as a pro that like maybe some of these things that you might have taken for granted at the college level, now you need to put a little bit more work and dedication into that at the NFL level and adjust off of that. I tend to feel like that's where we are in some of the pass blocking, those types of things. Some of these guys that are just bigger, stronger, faster than he's ever seen in his life, and you feel like you've taken this rep 1,000 times over the last 4 years, and so you set yourself up for the block, and then at the last second, their angle is way different, and your quarterback's going to get killed, and you kind of were on autopilot versus like where I've normally seen this happen.
Yeah, and also, like, he hasn't had to learn this is something that just kinda dawned on me, but, like, he hasn't had to learn a new offense in 4 years. He spent his entire time at
No,
Ohio
they
State.
did. They had a no. Chip Kelly came in last year. Was the new offense coordinator last year, and they brought in Quinchad
Right,
Judkins. So they
right.
had, and it was weird too. I don't think they really got to the point of doing anything. But Bill O'Brien was there for like a month before he took the Boston College job, and then offense
I was
coordinator.
looking more at Ryan Day being the consistent guy there for the
Yeah,
last 4 years, but I think you're right, there was a big change once Chip Kelly showed up.
yeah, yeah. So Chip Kelly put his imprint on the offense last year.
Well, let's move on to some wide receivers that we want to talk about here. And Las Vegas, I think, is the first one that we want to talk about here. Obviously, Jacoby Myers has been doing his thing, leading the team in routes run and targets consistently. But what we saw this week were a few changes that I think we want to take note of. One, Jack Besh ran more routes this week than he did in the first 4 games combined. But what they won't tell you is that he still didn't run as many routes as Dante Thornton. But that's something that I think I want to talk about first. And then we can talk about some of the other situations here. Jack Besh, I think a lot of people pigeonholed him into being a slot receiver. But what he's been playing so far in the NFL is primarily outside. He comes in on 3 wide receiver sets. They kick Jacoby Myers into the slot. Jack Besh plays out wide. Do you think that he can usurp this role and take it from Dante Thornton?
I mean, do I
They're such
care?
different
I feel
players.
like do I care is the real question because
Fair.
I'm
I mean,
not
a lot of
entirely sure
people
that
who spent a second round rookie dynasty pick on Jack Besh care.
I think that if you look 2 or 3 years ago in your dynasty league in the second round, there was probably a lot of stupid picks in that. But I mean, Jack Besh might. I'm not saying that he's definitely going to be, but I am saying that I put them on the sheet because I just think that this is environmentally a very interesting conversation because Geno Smith has been horrendous. Geno Smith, 9 interceptions through 5 games. The last player to do that was Zach Wilson in 2021. So the list of guys with 9 interceptions in 5 games it's a very interesting list because there is like Troy Aikman or like Jim Kelly's on it, but then it's
Rookie year
also like
Peyton Manning, maybe?
yeah, I think it is legitimately like rookie year Peyton Manning,
Yeah.
but it's also like the worst quarterbacks you've ever seen in the NFL is like the rest of the list. So it's like not a good list to be on.
And not one you wanna be on when you're in your age 35 season. Like, this is
No,
something you wanna see from a guy early in his career, not in the twilight of it.
no, and then you've got Jacoby Myers who before the season said I don't want to be here anymore, like trade me, and then you've
I
got
said,
Brock.
did you I just wanna open that real quickly. Did you hear, like, what happened? Like, there was this story, like, Jacoby Myers requests a trade, and then everybody was, like, in panic for the next 2 weeks, and he's falling down draft boards, and people are trading him away for 3rd round picks, and then a reporter followed up with him, and they said, "So what happened with that trade request?" And he, like, so nonchalantly, he's like, "Oh, yeah, I asked, and they said no, and then I haven't brought it up since." And that was it.
Well, so my theory that I postulated at the time is there's just the wide receiver group chat. And so there's the wide receiver group chat and they're all just kind of taking turns on like right now it's AJ Brown's turn. So like they're all just kind of taking turns on like who gets and so when that came out, it was right when Terry McLaurin signed his extension. And so the wide receiver group chat probably said, "You know what? If the last couple weeks have been Terry time, like who's next?" And Jacoby was like, I wouldn't mind a turn here." And so Jacoby got his turn and then made the news for a little bit. But now AJ Brown gets to be the wide receiver group chat. They're all talking about him and he gets to do his thing. So he'll have a big game and it'll be another guy. But um, I think holistically, when you look environmentally at the Raiders, Brock Bowers is the real conversation here because it's from what I've seen and heard. Basically, this thing's not getting better until he shuts it down, more or less. But
Oh,
it seems to me
bye.
that
I will say this. I feel very confident in saying this. We won't see Brock Bowers until after the bye. He's going to rest up the next 2 weeks. They'll get the bye, and I think we'll see him in a month.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what it should. And I feel like even then in redraft leagues, you're putting a lot of hope in it working out for that, like after that point, because is this something that's lingering all year long? And does the Raiders competitive environment get to the point where they say, dude, you're our stud second year tight end, first round pick, like record breaker guy. We're not going to run you to the ground basically on a lost season. Do we have to just shut it down for the year? I think that's in play. I think the other thing that is interesting that we've seen the shift from very early in the season. Ashton Genty wasn't hardly used in the passing game, and they were having Dylan Lobby out there. They were having Zamir White getting passed on reps, and now it's kind of shifted a little bit. We've seen Ashton Genty get very involved in the passing game at moments and make big plays down the field. It's the to me they don't seem competitive enough to get Ashton Genty there on the ground for fantasy purposes. So like we really need to see the receiving probably for Ashton Genty to get the upside that we're hoping to see.
Yeah, and luckily we have seen that, so hopefully that'll maintain itself over the rest of the season here. Anything else you want to talk about, Jeff? Albert Okwuegbunam stepping in and kind of being the tight end one, is that newsworthy at all?
It's kind of interesting because when you look at what he does, it on some level of uh, good thing aggregators don't care about me because he's not Brock Bowers. But at some
Oh,
level, when
yeah.
you're looking for a tight end that can do some of the things that Brock Bowers can do, Albert Aquaman, this is Alberto. Like this is just a
I brought up
landmine. This is
I brought him up just
you're
because I wanted to
you're
hear you
just
say it.
throwing it out there. Aquaman. So we'll just try that. But Alberto, but he runs like a wide receiver tight end the way that Brock Bowers does, and so when it's not going to be Ian Thomas doing the things that Brock Bowers does. I'll tell you that much. So if you've got this built into your offense, Alberto can be a potential plug in there, and so just the deepest of leagues before I'd even think about that. But
But we are in those deep leagues, and I
yeah,
will be placing a handful of bids on Albert Okwuegbunam later tonight. Let's talk
sweet.
about the Detroit Lions here. Amon-Ra leading the team in routes, targets. I mean, like, just he's the guy there. Like, there's no question about it that Amon-Ra is the clear wide receiver one. And then we saw 6 targets go to Sam Laporta for 92 yards, just 1 target to Jameson Williams for 9 yards. Jeff, we talked about panicking a little bit with Alvin Kamara. Are we at the panic level yet with Jameson Williams? Or are you still trying to maintain some composure here?
Oh, I'm panicked about Jameson Williams, but you didn't have even the things that I found most interesting, which is fun about when we do this because I think there were 2 things that I found very very interesting about the Lions' attack in this game, and the first one was we saw a lot heavier usage of Brock Wright and a lot more
Mhm.
2 tight end sets, and as part of that, we saw a lot more intentional usage of Sam Laporta and kind of bringing Sam Laporta in to be the slot receiver and having Brock Wright on the line. The other thing that we saw was Khalif Raymond was running like I think week 4 like 55% of the snaps, and then week 5 it was 2 snaps that he had, and it was Isaac Tisla that came in as the guy that was the wide receiver 3. And so what they really did was they had Raymond previously as the wide receiver 3, and like kind of 2 tight ends were a thing that they would kind of go to occasionally. Whereas in this game, it was we're going heavy with 2 tight end sets, and I think it was even there was Ross Dwelly, I think, is the third tight end there. And so it was something like Wright was at about 73% snaps. Dwelly was like at like 27% snaps. So if you can do the math between the 2 of them, that's 100. And there's only 100% of the snaps available. So they were committed to having 2 and 3 tight ends in this game. And maybe it's just a product of knowing they were playing against the Bengals and knowing like this game meant a ton to David Montgomery, and I think that was a really special story to come out of this game. A first time in 7 years he gets to play in his hometown. His sister was in a tragic accident and paralyzed in an accident, was able to be at the game. So I think that they came into it expecting we're gonna beat the what out of the Bengals, and so we're gonna be a run heavy approach in this game. But I think coming out of it, it
One more thing,
really
since you brought up David Montgomery real quickly, did you also see he played quarterback in high school like so many other NFL stars do? So like even drawing up a play for him to throw a passing touchdown where
Yeah.
like it wasn't a gimmick either. Like he just lined up as a shotgun quarterback and threw a touchdown. Like that's the type of stuff that Dan Campbell does that like you can't really put a value on it, but like that's why his players just love him so
Yeah.
much because like he takes notice of those sorts of things. Like I've got chills right now just thinking about it. Like how cool is that to like go back to your hometown, play in front of your sister after what she had to go through, throwing a touchdown for the first time in your NFL career, like in the same city that you played high school quarterback. Like give it up to Dan Campbell, man. He is just a hell of a guy.
Yeah, I mean that's leadership. That's what leadership does, is recognizing that in your people, putting them in a position to succeed, but also recognizing what's important to your people and taking care of those things. And so you're exactly right.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about regarding the Lions? I know I cut you off because I wanted to get in that David
Yeah, well,
Montgomery passing. Yeah.
I think from coming out of this, I think buy Sam Laporta, because I think that there's I already seen conversation of like, well, you can't. I mean, Sam Laporta, like he was so disappointing the last year, and like I mean, they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and James, like Sam Laporta. What's that going to even be? But to me, I feel like week 4, they kind of were like, let's get this rolling with Jameson Williams. And then it didn't kind of get rolling with Jameson Williams. And then week 5, they were kind of like, maybe we need to have Laporta as the slot here and use Amon Ra. That seems to be what I saw in this game here.
And we'll see what happens in week 6 because now they get to go up against the Chiefs. And if they want to beat the Chiefs, they're not going to be able to toy with their food and draw up passing touchdowns for their running backs and run these jumbo 3 tight end sets. Like they might need some explosion there. So, yeah, definitely starting to panic about Jameson Williams, but holding on to hope for one more week. Still
Well,
starting him in quite a few lineups where I can.
yeah, and it's interesting too because we get we can beat ourselves up, or we can get frustrated about like not predicting the usage pattern. But the reality of it is these teams are going against very, very, very smart defensive minds who've put way, way more work into this than we ever have, and have a higher level of understanding of it. So the idea that like a team is going to just use this guy, or like this is their plan and whatnot, is kind of idiotic to think that like that, because they're practicing in the art of deception to be able to work against these defenses. And so it's one of those things that like have some, telling myself here this, but like have some grace on yourself a little bit on terms of not predicting these things right down to the bone, because they're trying to be deceptive on purpose. And so sometimes what they might have done the week before, what it might be looking like the next week, they might scrap it entirely because they know that defense is coming in expecting that thing that they're going to see.
Last team I want to talk about here, Jeff, Jacksonville Jaguars. And, it's kind of interesting because, everybody's panicking about Brian Thomas Jr. Last night, he led the team. Well, I say last night because we're recording on Tuesday, but Monday night, he led the team in routes, led the team in targets, led the team in receptions, led the team in yards. I mean, we should be excited about that. But this Liam Cohen offense, man, they spread the ball around thin. And I'm thinking back to last year in Tampa Bay. Of course, we had Baker Mayfield, who was able to have just an unbelievable season. And we have these great talents and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin who are able to do the most with their opportunities. But then I started thinking about like the Kate Otten usage and the Jalen McMillan usage and the Sterling Shepard usage and all of these tertiary players that were regularly involved in the offense. And now here we see Brian Thomas Jr. might be the nominal wide receiver 1, but Travis Hunter is coming in. He's making these splashy plays. We've seen his routes stay pretty steady throughout the season, but Diami Brown, Parker Washington, a lot of guys that we didn't expect to be involved are very heavily involved in this offense. So what are you making of this? And we also need to note that Brenton Strange also hit IR, so he's going to miss at least 4 weeks as well, and he has been their leading pass catcher so far.
Joey Wright decided to tail me last night on some plays, and we needed Hunter Long to catch one more pass to cash. For me, it would have been $500, but he played like every single snap, like the second half, and he caught one ball, and it was so frustrating. But neither here nor there. I think are people still panicked about Brian Thomas? Like even after last night, people panicked about Brian Thomas because
I mean, he really saved it with that, final game-winning drive, the big catch. Going up. Prior to that, he had like 40 yards, 40 scoreless yards. That's not what you want to see from a guy you drafted at the end of round 1.
well, yeah, I mean, That's a different conversation about when you should draft it in, but neither here nor there on that too. But at the same time, like they're going up
Yeah,
against the
Brian
Chiefs.
Thomas is currently the wide receiver 36. I just want to
Well,
point
I
that out.
understand. Yes, I
Yeah,
understand that.
people are panicking about Brian Thomas. Yes.
I understand the Bengals game and all those things. Like, sure, but I mean, 80 yards, like that's fine. Like, yeah, you need some boom weeks to come in here. You need some spike weeks to get out of this. But um, I just thought it was a like it's a weird offense to me. Of like, they fell behind 14-0, and I feel like I could tell that it felt like they were throwing on every single play, but then they threw 25 passes. It was like this is, and then like 10,
There was a lot of dropbacks that turned into Trevor Lawrence scrambles.
that was a lot of that. There was a lot of like Trevor Lawrence doing his thing. Yeah, a lot of weird stuff. But
Trevor Lawrence doing his thing, saying a million words with five.
exactly, exactly. The Trevor
So
Lawrence
what's your takeaway
experience.
here? I mean, so you're not panicking on Brian Thomas Jr. We love that.
Well, I
We gotta talk
am.
about
I
yeah.
mean, I am because I don't know that the ceiling's there, but at the same time, he is the type of player that like Jamison Williams, he can catch two balls for 65 yards each and have a 35-point week any week. It's just that, well, unlike Jamison Williams, he does get some level of volume, but yeah, I think you maybe last year in a lost season with the Mac Jones that we see is capable of getting the ball to his receivers. I mean, Kendrick Bourne had a big game with Mac Jones. So that to me feels like we were chasing something that was probably a little bit unsustainable. But
Also in those games, I want to point out late in the year when Mac Jones was out there, no Evan Ingram, no Christian Kirk. I mean,
right.
it was just launching the ball downfield to Brian Thomas Jr. 12 to 15 times every single week.
Yes, exactly. In a trailing game script and just YOLO ball, straight up YOLO ball, exactly what you want to see. They really want to run the ball, and everything functions off of the run now, and so that's all their passes. It seems like they work off of boots and play actions and all those types of things, and getting Trevor Lawrence on the perimeter. And how many times were I mean, there was I think it was I'm pretty certain it was Brian Thomas. He took a shot in the end zone when he had Travis Etienne wide open
Mhm.
underneath. It could have picked up 8 yards. So
Probably could have picked up the
he,
touchdown if he just threw the ball to ETN. I don't know why he threw it to a blanketed Brian Thomas Jr., but yeah,
yeah,
again, Trevor Lawrence doing Trevor Lawrence things, as you like to say.
yeah. But I mean, I was not discouraged about Brian Thomas coming out of that game, but I understand it's been a really rough month.
For Travis Hunter, we have seen like a shockingly steady route participation. 27 routes in week 1, 27 routes in week 2, 27 routes in week 3, 23 in week 4, and 26 last week. Do you think that's just kind of what we should expect from Travis Hunter? Is that he's just going to come out for like 25 to 30 snaps every single week, and every once in a while he'll have these eye-popping plays where it's like, oh my goodness, yeah, that guy won the Heisman last year. But fantasy-wise, I struggle to see how he gets there this year.
Yeah, I think so too. I've been raking him pretty low the last couple of weeks, and yeah, I mean, he made the splash play. That's what he can do. That's why he went in second overall in the draft. He's a really good player, a really good athlete, so he can do that. But we just got done talking way too long about Brian Thomas not getting, and Brian Thomas isn't getting 15 targets. So it's just the design of the offense isn't going to be designed to scheme 12 targets to Travis Hunter and 15 targets to Brian Thomas, and nobody else is allowed to touch the ball. There are some offenses that are like that in the NFL. This doesn't seem like it's going to be one.
I got to say, like the big splash play, the big downfield catch that Travis Hunter had was unbelievable. But what he did with that little catch that he had like two defenders on him and just able to like in the blink of an eye just like out juke two defenders and then pick up 10 yards for a first down. That's the stuff that makes him special. And I know he's been great on defense. Like I do want to see that role on offense grow though. And Troy Aikman said it last night. I don't know if you heard during the broadcast. He said that he was talking with Deion Sanders, and Deion Sanders said, like, it doesn't make any sense, but the more you play Travis Hunter, the better he gets. Like,
Yeah.
the more he plays, the better he gets. And I wonder if we're just going to have that one game where Liam Cohen's just going to say, screw it. Let's see what you can do. Like 100% on defense, 100% on offense. Let's see what happens here. And that's kind of what I'm waiting for. But until then, Travis Hunter, very benchable in your non-IDP leagues. Well, Jeff, that'll do it. We covered a bunch of backfields and wide receiver rooms and some tight ends and even talked about some quarterbacks while we were in there as well. Just talking about what we think are some of the usage trends that you should know about coming out of week 5. We'll be back tomorrow talking about some of our biggest rest of season risers and fallers going into week 6. And then, of course, back Friday with our matchup previews. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to tune in today. We'll see you tomorrow.